All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamal Walker, and you are tuning into the Love Heart Project. So, what is the Love Heart Project? The Love Heart Project is a series of interviews that I've decided to conduct with uh, primarily white people right now, who I call white allies of Black and brown skinned people who uh, want to share their voice about how their hearts are um, affected by everything that we're seeing in the world today with racism, white supremacy, systemic racism, however you want to look at that. Um, but coming from a place of truly being allies to Black and brown skinned people and wanting people to know that indeed they are affected and infected by everything that we're seeing happen. So the goal is to give people a platform to share that with the world, and also to demonstrate that through outward and purposeful expressions of love and a deep desire for connection with Black and brown skinned people, that the love vibration will become so strong that any refusal to connect with it and its frequency will become too painful for the heart to bear. So with that being said, I'd like to invite my good friend, Amy. Amy, how you doing?
I'm great, Jamal. Thank you.
Great to have you here. So Amy, I'd like to start off with you just sharing a little bit of your background and your connection with Black and brown skinned people. Who is Amy Cook?
I grew up in amidst a lot of trauma. I grew up in the foster care system, and really my life has been about healing trauma. And I have an interracial family, so that's been a part of my journey. And really, what I feel like my life path has really been about is about the deep healing of inner trauma and the miracles that can come out of that.
Wonderful. All right. So let's tell everyone that might be watching here, what is your connection with me?
My connection with you. Well, I think we met in Summer Times Bakery and Deli. That was a local restaurant here. And I remember you walking in. I remember us sitting at a table, and I was supposed to be interviewing you for a job. But I think what really happened is that we just connected on so many levels. And I just really remember my heart just, the doors just flying open when I was with you. And that's just never stopped.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And we've been in the trenches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to take part in the Love Heart Project?
Well, I think it's the work that we are doing culturally, personally, interpersonally, in our families, in ourselves, in our towns, in our nation, and on the planet. This is the work.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, Amy, what comes to your mind when you think about the things we're seeing concerning the recent events with the murder of George Floyd, and also like the recent tweets and responses from President Trump? What comes to your mind with all of this happening? And of course, we have all the protests that are going around nationwide. How are you dealing with all of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are living through an extraordinary time. I think we are all being deeply, deeply called to the extraordinary work that belongs to this time. One of my favorite quotes is, do not be afraid. You were born for this time. And I think we all need to be engaging in this work. You and I have talked a lot about 2020, clear vision, having the veil lifted in this time. This is the time when we see truth. We see what's really underneath everything. So I think the work, if I could define what I think this work is that we're being called to, I think it's about seeing the wound that, and this is why it's so extraordinarily difficult, because looking at the wound is really, really hard. It's hard in our own lives. It's hard in ourselves to look at those really dark places, to look at the places where we are wounded. And, I've said a lot, we're weird where we're wounded. And we are that, it comes out in all kinds of ways with our families and with the people that we really love. And we have that love forces us to be coming back to ourselves, to look at that deep wound. Now we're being called to do that in a bigger way, in a much bigger way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what was your initial reaction when you saw the news and maybe even accompanying video footage of what happened with George Floyd? What was your initial feeling?
Oh, just such sick. I mean, I think the only word I can describe it with is just sick. That twisting in my gut of, it's just horror. It's horror. Yeah. And that feeling of, and I think this is a place that we really have to be careful with, because it's that feeling of hopelessness that can come up, like, not again. And yet, of course we know the wound's not healed. It's going to happen again until we heal. It's going to happen until we heal. But you just don't want to see it. You don't want it to happen. You don't want it to happen. It's just so sickening, so horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, my next question, of course, I feel like I already know part of your answer, but because I know who you are. But I purposely have written this question this way. Is racism a real issue in our country? And if so, why does it matter to you personally?
Yeah. Well, racism is an issue. And racism has been an issue for hundreds of years. And it matters to me deeply on so many different levels. As I said, I have an interracial family, so, it affects me in that way. But I also, and I think this is really important for me as a white person, that to really see how racism has impacted me. We talk about white privilege, and white privilege is an extraordinarily real thing. If I had not been white, my life would have been very, very different. I grew up, as I said, in the foster care system. I dealt with poverty. I dealt with abuse. I dealt with all kinds of issues. But because I was white, what I didn't deal with was racism. And that issue would have impacted me in completely different ways. But what I also think is really important is that we see the cost that white privilege also carries with it. This enormous cost of that we aren't connected. We are separated. And that carries with it a pain and like I said, a wound that I think is so important for white people to really feel in their bodies. I'm reading a remarkable book right now, My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. And he really talks about feeling this in your body, going in and feeling this generational trauma that goes back, hundreds of years, to actually bring it into your own real lived experience in your body. And I think that's extraordinarily powerful work, and that we all need to do that work because we're all sharing in this wound, all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you touched on, let me go back to my questions here. Oh yeah. So thank you for touching on white privilege. I'd like to maybe ask you a little bit more about that, like the ways that because white privilege is a really tricky thing for a lot of people, especially white people, to try and understand, especially for people who have gone through similar to what you alluded to, like, growing up in the foster care system, growing up poor, all these different things. For a lot of white people, they're like, how did I have privilege? I dealt with all this stuff. We were poor all my life, and, on government assistance and this and that. How am I privileged? Can you touch more on that? Maybe make that more clear for people?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's this water that we swim in. And I think that's what makes it so hard. You almost have to get extracted so you can look at it. And then when you go back in, you're like, oh, whoa, I'm swimming in water. So I think, being able to kind of get yourself out, I think part of that is touching the wound that racism is. Mm-hmm. But it's also, like me, really recognizing that the color of my skin enabled me to move past a lot of the issues that I did deal with, in ways that if my skin color was Black, it would have been a very different thing. So knowing that,
when you say that, how do you how can you put that in sort of practical terms? Like, okay. What would it look? What would it? Imagine if you were Black, and you kind of do the video camera, right, of your life,
right?
And you look back at it and you go, if my skin had been Black, what ways can I see it would have been more difficult for me to come back from what I experienced?
Yeah, I think it would have impacted, right from the beginning, how I was dealt with in the foster care system. The families that I was with, and the ways that those families dealt with me. I think people saw possibility in me because I was white. In my high school, I had a really critical turning point, and it was when somebody said, "You need to go to college." If I was Black, would they have said that? Would they have seen the possibilities in me in that same way? And I think not. There would have been more. I would have been discouraged in ways that I wasn't. And that would have changed the entire outcome of who I am.
Mm-hmm. You just reminded me of a time when I was in high school, and I didn't realize or feel any sort of way about this experience until years later. But I was sitting in the counselor's office to go over my course schedule. This was probably junior year, preparing for senior year and graduation. And so I had signed up for advanced courses. And the counselor was a white woman, very nice woman, She saw that I had signed up for these advanced courses. Now I had actually transferred to a public high school closer to home, where I had previously been going to a college prep private high school in San Francisco, and then I moved back closer to home, and so I wanted to be closer to my friends and my community and everything, and so I went to this high school in Redwood City, and And so they wanted to go over my course schedule, and I had signed up for all these advanced courses, in English and science and literature and all this stuff. And she asked me on several occasions with each one of those classes, like, are you sure that you can handle these classes? Because these are advanced courses, And I didn't think about it at the time, but, when I looked back on it as a young adult, I thought about that and I was like, I wonder, would she have asked that of a white student, and it was a couple of different times. And I had, really good grades, good GPA and all that stuff. So it wasn't like I was, a student with like a 2.0 trying to take advanced courses or something like that. There was nothing to indicate that maybe I might not be able to handle that course load. So those are the kind of things that, as a Black person growing up, I dealt with all the time. And a lot of times in the moment, didn't even know that like this might have had something to do with people's preconceived notions of who I was based on the color of my skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think, it can be incredibly subtle too. But the subtlety has no less impact for how subtle that is. I went up to Tahoe with my niece, and my niece is Black. We were in a shop and browsing, hanging out, and I'm over by a set of coffee mugs and stuff, just looking at things. She's over somewhere else. Shopkeeper comes, stands right next to her, and it's like, it's that kind of thing is constant. It's constant. And white people don't see it. We're insulated from it. And that's the insulation that has to break down. I think we have to stop our insulation and really be able to see.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So this is an interesting question. Now, it's funny because Bill Drake, I sent him the questions and everything, and he asked me about this one. And I think part of it was because of his analytical researcher's mind. So this is an imaginal question. That's kind of how I look at it. If you were in a position to diagnose, like almost like from a medical standpoint, you're right. If you were in a position to diagnose the problem of racism, what would your diagnosis be?
Profound disconnection. I think that's really what it is at its heart.
Mm-hmm.
At its heart. But I think, that goes so deep, and the diagnosis, there's been much better minds than me that have diagnosed this issue. It's really, it goes back so many generations too, that disconnection, that fundamental human disconnection. It just goes back so long and is, like, again, I think really embedded in our bodies. That disconnection that is visceral. It's what happens when a white person is walking down the street. So me, a white woman walking down a street, Black man comes toward me. What is my visceral, actual reaction? Do I shift my purse? Do I cross to the other side? Is my heart pounding? It's disconnection. We can't, it's that sense that we aren't connecting, and that there's something deep, deep, deep inside of us, that wound that prevents it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And if I can just say one more thing, if the diagnosis gives the cure, so if we know what the problem is, then we know what the cure is. So if disconnection is the problem, then what's the cure? It's connection. It's connection.
Yeah.
It's love. It's what you're doing, Jamal. It's love.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. So, what does the concept of white supremacy mean to you, and how do you benefit from it, and how does it harm you?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit. This is an invention um, that benefited white people. Um, again for generations. Um, it is the systemic embeddedness of, well, first of all, the invention of race. We could just talk about that for a really long time, because race actually is an invention. It's not, people are like, oh no, I'm biologically this, I'm biologically that. Race is an invention. It's a cultural invention. So first of all, just to recognize that, and then recognize how the invention of race has kept us imprisoned in these ways. White supremacy, first of all, I think it's economic, and that's just my personal view.
Mm-hmm.
It came out of an economic need for free labor, for people to make enormous sums of money and exploit another people to make that happen. And that exploitation keeps going. That exploitation is happening right now in our culture, on our planet, for sure. That exploitation just keeps going. Enormous amounts of power were at play. And so the institutional white supremacist culture had to be put into place to ensure that economic system kept running, that engine kept running. And it's still happening, as we said, it's still happening. All we have to do to know that is look at the incarceration rates. Just, that's it. Then we just know that's still embedded. It's here. It's with us every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, beautiful explanation. Thank you very much. And so how do you benefit from that? And then how does it harm you?
Yeah. I mean, I benefit from it every day, walking down the street, going in shops. I have a freedom that I take for granted. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to wonder when I'm driving if I'm going to get pulled over. I don't have to think about it. I just don't think about it. I live it with a freedom that I never question. So this anxiety in me, it's not there. I don't walk around worried. I don't walk around worried. I walk around at ease. I don't worry that somebody's going to think something of me that isn't true. Well, sometimes I do worry about that, but it's not because of my skin. It's not because of my skin. Something I absolutely cannot alter. I never think about it.
Right. And I think that's the key aspect of it. Anytime we're talking about, the effects of white supremacy or white privilege, is that key piece that, yeah, you might, have certain experiences in the world. Yeah, maybe you did grow up poor, or maybe you did, were the victim of abuse. I mean, all humans have a multitude of experiences, but the major difference is that you don't have to question whether or not any of those circumstances were present or happened to you because of the color of your skin.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I benefited because of my skin color. Mm-hmm. Over and over and over and over.
Yeah. There's I don't know if you're familiar with the comedian Paul Mooney. Mm. He's a Black comedian, been around forever, since the days, back in Richard Pryor's days, and he used to actually write for Richard Pryor, and they did shows together and stuff like that. And he's a really hardcore, like a lot of people would consider him, like if they're watching him for the first time, they think they might want to label him a black racist, which is an interesting concept. I won't go into all that, but
it's an interesting concept.
but he has this one joke that he tells, and it's funny on the surface, but it's very real and deep on another level. And he says, anytime I see a poor, homeless white person, I get depressed. I say to myself, what a waste of good white skin.
Oh, ouch. Yeah. Yeah.
But that kind of drives that point home, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So I just want to say thank you.
What we didn't talk about is how it damages me.
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I think that's such an important thing. And when you're the recipient of this sort of unearned, undeserved, really privilege, I think it can be really hard to see the cost of what that is. And the way that I have been best able to feel that cost is, and in a way it's kind of a cultural cost too, but I partake in that, is that disconnection. I think there's a joy that's missing from our world that's the result of white supremacy. There's a joy that we miss.
Say more about that. Like, what does that look like for you?
I think what that looks like for me is that I think what it looks like for me is that because I'm white, I am not fully embedded there is a world that I'm not part of fully, that it's that joy. I think, when we touch it, we know it. When we're all, sharing in work that matters, when we're all, really, when we're connected, there's a profound joy. And when we're not, even if we're not conscious of it, there's a pain in that. And so I think it's that we've lost something. We've lost something huge that we don't even see. We don't even see it. But I think if it starts, when it starts coming back, what we're going to feel is joy.
Yeah. Yeah. How you doing?
Good.
Good. I want to thank you again for taking the time to do this and sharing your heart.
Yeah.
All right. And so we already kind of jumped ahead and talked a little bit about white privilege. And so that's great. So here's another imaginal piece. All right. So I want you to take a moment and just think about what Black and brown skinned people mean to you and have meant to you in your life. Think of the relationships you have, what you love about us, and what you know of the struggles that we've faced as a culture in this country. And then imagine yourself sharing those thoughts with a white audience, however large or small. And then finish this sentence. If you only knew.
If you only knew the joy that could come, that is there already, ready, that comes from the connection that we all have. If you only knew what it's like to celebrate full out our shared struggles, our shared world. If you only knew the love that's right on the other side. I have to just reference somebody that I admire a great deal, Valerie Kaur, and she talks about childbirth as a metaphor for our activism, and that there's a stage in childbirth transition where you think you're going to die. You know you're going to die, actually, and it's actually okay. But it's like so painful, so horrible, so wrenching that you think you can't live. Right on the other side of that is unimaginable joy. When that baby is born, you've gone through the hell and you have emerged into bliss. I think that is so powerful, because if we only knew the bliss that's right on the other side of this hard work, because we have to do really hard work. We have to do really hard work. And I think it's not just the hard work of, and I think for white liberals, so I actually do want to say this to white liberals, I think we think that the hard work is being allies with Black and brown people. I think that's what we think as the really hard work. And I think that's not our hard work. I think our hard work is actually being allies and reaching out to our racist family members, to our racist, people in the grocery store. I don't know if you heard what happened last night in Colfax. A really horrible thing happened last night that showed that we have extreme racism in our community. That's the transition. That's the part that's going to be really hard, is we have to reach out to those people. We have to reach out and actually find the wound there. Find the place that is so damaged there. Now, we can't heal it. That's their job. But what we can do is recognize it and show up for it, not other it, not push it away, because it'll just make it stronger. We know when we can't deal with something and we push it, it just comes back. We know that in our own lives. All we have to look at is that thing we keep pushing away in our own lives that comes back and gets us. So it's that I think is so critical. So if we only knew that the work that we have to do is not, I think certainly we are going to stand with our Black and brown brothers and sisters. We are going to do that work. But I think we've got harder work.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. So here's our last question. If you were to write a letter to George Floyd, what would it say?
Well, I think what I would say is, your death matters. That your precious life was given, and we're going to make it matter. We are going to make it matter over and over and over and over. You will not have died in vain. That your life mattered. and matters. And it will keep mattering.
Yeah.
And that everything we do moving forward can be honoring that. And we will honor that. That's what I want you to know, George Floyd, that we will keep that honor going.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy, for taking the time to do this. And I know your heart. I know how you roll. And I know that you stand with me and that you stand with us. I know that. So,
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Love is hard, but oh my goodness, it's worth it.
Right? All of our would-be viewers here for taking the time to watch and listen and share it with your friends. This is the Love Heart Project. My name is Jamal Walker. I'm grateful to have you on board. And thank you again, Amy Cook, for joining me today in this interview and your love and your heart.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank you for your work.
All right. Signing off.